Today, we are diving into one of the 20th century's most electric and, honestly, heartbreaking relationships. We're talking about two absolute giants of art, Salvador Dalí and Federico García Lorca. It's a story of genius, revolution, and a connection so intense it literally haunted one of them to his dying day. All right, let's get into it.
We're going to start right here with a confession. Decades after his friend was gone, an old Salvador Dalí finally said it out loud. And wow, that one sentence, it tells you everything you need to know. This is the core of our story. A love that was as powerful as it was impossible. A magnetic pull between two geniuses that would change modern art forever and end in total tragedy.
So where does a story like this even begin? Well, it starts in a place just buzzing with rebellion and creative juice. 1920s Spain. Okay, so picture this. Madrid's famous Residencia de Estudiantes. Think of it as a superdome for Spain's absolute brightest young minds. And it was here that this incredible group of artists and poets got together. We call them the Generation of 27. They were young, they were brilliant, and they had one mission, to just smash the old stuffy traditions of Spanish art and build something completely new. And right at the heart of this creative storm, you've got three guys, the poet Lorca, the filmmaker Luis Buñuel, and this really shy, kind of weird painter named Salvador Dalí. And what was the fuel for this whole revolution? It was an idea called surrealism. The poet Octavio Paz nailed it here. This wasn't just some new painting style. It was a movement of liberation. It was all about digging deep into the subconscious, into dreams, and unlocking the weird, hidden worlds inside our own heads. And that desire, right there, is what would pull Dalí and Lorca together like magnets. So, you have this shared revolutionary spark, and pretty quickly it catches fire, blossoming into something way more personal, way more intense, and building up to one of the most complicated love stories in art history.
And I mean, look at how fast this all happens. They meet in 23. Just 2 years later, their bond is so tight that Lorca is spending Easter with Dalí's family at their seaside home. And that trip, man, that trip was everything. It's so profound that the very next year, Lorca writes his famous Ode to Salvador Dalí, which is just this passionate poem about his feelings. By 27, they're working together. 4 years. That's all it took to go from strangers to completely inseparable soulmates.
And if you want to know just how intense this was, you just have to look at their letters. Dalí writes this to Lorca. "You are a Christian storm, and you are in need of some of my paganism." I mean, come on. This isn't just two friends writing. This is intellectual seduction. It's this incredible dance between two minds who are just completely fascinated by each other.
But, and this is the big but, here's where the tragedy really kicks in. Lorca, who was openly gay among his friends, was, by Dalí's own admission, madly in love with him. He tried to take their relationship to a physical place. Dalí, though, he just couldn't do it. He was fascinated, he was drawn in, but he was also terrified. So he kept their bond in this supercharged but ultimately platonic space. And that right there, that's the tragic part Dalí was talking about all those years later.
So what happens when you have this much unfulfilled passion, this much intellectual fire and raw genius all in one place? Well, it has to go somewhere, and it explodes onto the canvas and onto the page.
Their influence on each other was just massive. Dalí saw that Lorca could draw, I mean really draw, and he pushed him to explore it, to get weird with it, to get surreal. And in return, Lorca's whole personality, his poetry, it became a central obsession in Dalí's paintings. Their art basically became this secret language, a coded conversation where they could say all the things that were too complicated and too intense to say out loud.
Okay, so to crack this secret language, you gotta know the code. Let's start with the ants. For Dalí, ants were this recurring nightmare. They symbolized death, decay, and his deepest fears, apparently stemming from some childhood memory. They pop up everywhere in his work, hinting at this anxiety he has, this feeling that everything, maybe even their relationship, is doomed to fall apart. But it wasn't all doom and gloom. To counter the ants, Dalí had the egg. The egg was all about hope, new life, and love. So when you look at his paintings from this time, you see this constant battle playing out. The ants of decay fighting the eggs of hope. It's literally their relationship right there on the canvas.
And all of this creative chaos, this emotional turmoil, it leads to one of the most famous paintings in history, The Persistence of Memory. Now, this was painted in 1931, right after things had started to go south between them. And that timing is absolutely key. The dreamy, haunted, melting world you see in that painting is totally inseparable from the psychological roller coaster of a relationship that was already turning into a painful, powerful memory.
But as we know, even the most intense fires can burn out. And a couple of key events, and one very, very important person, would come along and shatter their twin spirit connection for good. So what went wrong? Well, it was really two major blows. First, Dalí and their friend Buñuel publicly tore apart Lorca's most beloved work, his Gypsy Ballads. They called it traditional, basically an insult in their surrealist world. It was a huge public betrayal. But the second blow was the knockout punch, the arrival of Gala. Dalí met his future wife, she became his entire universe, and she was fiercely jealous of Lorca. So jealous, in fact, that she started destroying the poet's letters to Dalí.
And Lorca's response? It was brutally simple. He wrote to a friend, "I don't like Gala." That's it. And with those 4 words, the whole dynamic was sealed. The friendship was, for all intents and purposes, over. Lorca, the great love of Dalí's youth, was now a forbidden name.
And just as their own personal world was collapsing, the bigger world around them was exploding. The Spanish Civil War was about to break out, and it would force both men to make choices that would send them down 2 tragically different paths. And this is where you really see the fork in the road. Their whole philosophies on what art is even for, they just couldn't be more opposite now. Lorca believed art had a job to do, a social responsibility. For him, art for art's sake was ridiculous in a time of crisis. Dalí, he claimed to be above politics, believing only in tradition. These 2 worldviews would decide everything.
So what did that mean in practice? Well, they each made a choice. Lorca made the fateful decision to go back home to Granada. He knew it was dangerous because of his politics, but he chose to stand with his people. Dalí, he fled. He ran from the war. And even though he claimed to be neutral, he would eventually get cozy with Franco's fascist regime, the very same regime that was about to murder his friend.
And so, this is the end. In August of 1936, Federico García Lorca was arrested in Granada. He was taken to a field and executed by a firing squad. His death was more than just a tragedy. He instantly became a martyr, a powerful global symbol of artistic freedom being crushed by fascism.
You'd think the story ends there, right? Lorca's dead, but for Dalí, the story was nowhere near over. In fact, his friend's memory would become a ghost that would haunt him for the next 50 years. And this brings us right back to the melting clocks. All of a sudden, the title, The Persistence of Memory, lands with this chilling new weight. Dalí was absolutely tormented by guilt, by what he'd done, by the friend he'd lost. He became obsessed, even painting Lorca's face into some of his later works. The memory of that love and how it ended, it persisted.
And if you need any more proof of how deep this went, listen to this. At the very end of his life, when Dalí was sick and delirious, the nurses taking care of him said there was only one thing he said that they could understand. One name repeated over and over. My friend Lorca.
So that's what we're left with. 2 towering figures of the 20th century. One, a martyr whose life was cut short, but whose art became a banner for resistance. The other, a mad genius who lived a long and famous life, but was forever trapped by the ghost of a love he, quote, could not share. Their legacies are tangled together forever, a tragic story of what was and what might have been. So the question is, which story haunts you more?